Hello, I'm Bewildebeest, and this is Twilight Princess Moonjump any percent. Moonjump is a cheat code that allows the player to give Link extra height by holding R and pressing A. This simple ability to clear obstacles drastically changes the any percent route and makes for a very strange Twilight Princess speedrun. Just like a normal any percent run, this run begins with the trick back in time, but we can do it in the very first area of the game with Moonjump instead of having to leave to find a more accessible void. To achieve back in time, the player resets the console and voids Link out on the very same frame, causing him to respawn on the title screen. And on the title screen, we can void out once more to clear the splash screen and then make a save file. The properties of this save file are the properties of Link on the title screen. He's got a sword in hand and a shield in hand, he's wearing the hero's clothes, the flag for having tamed Epona is set, and most importantly for this category, day 1 of Orden is skipped, meaning we can get to Midna faster. Speaking of Midna, while normal any percent, at least in the current time, requires beating a whole lot of the game and getting a lot of things, this category really doesn't need to get very much. It will be necessary to get the Master Sword and Ending Blow, the first hidden skill, in order to beat the final bosses, and in order to get Ending Blow, we're going to need Midna. The Lantern isn't strictly required for this category, but it's pretty much on our way, and it will save some time in Hyrule Castle. Aside from the Lantern, there's only one more item wheel item we'll get, and it's in the Forest Temple, though it might not be what you're expecting. And so our first objective is to get to the Forest Temple. Wonky routing aside, my favorite thing about this category is that it forces me as a runner to rethink all of my movement options, since the options with Moonjump are so completely different from what's normally available to me. Maximum roll speed is about 32 units, which is pretty fast, but it gets attenuated when Link is rolling up a slope. So I chose to hop over that slope with Moonjump rather than rolling up. A jump like that while just moving forwards is about 21 speed. In some cases though, we can use Moonjump to preserve even higher speeds. Here I will target one of the bokoblins and do a long jump attack on it, giving a speed of about 36 units, and I will carry that speed nearly all the way to the Forest Temple, skipping the cutscene trigger that's at the bottom of this winding path. With Moonjump, we can simply jump over the rocks blocking the entrance to the Forest Temple, though I do take a moment to line up because it's easy to miss this load zone behind the rocks. There is some nuance to understanding jump attack speeds, but basically if I target an enemy and jump attack while it's far enough away from Link and it's on higher ground than Link, then I'll get some serious speed. So after targeting that Baba, I backed away just a little bit so I could get some more speed, and make it all the way over the giant invisible wall blocking the player from climbing the vines before saving the monkey. Now, in normal Twilight Princess speedruns, the boomerang is one of the most important items in the game, allowing us to do long jump attacks basically wherever we want to, and do a lot of sequence breaks. But in this speedrun, we don't need it because we can already jump wherever we want to. The item that we really need in Forest Temple is Uku. Using the Forest Temple Uku will either bring Link back into the Forest Temple or bring him to the entrance to the Forest Temple, which serves as a nice geographical hub for a lot of the things that we need in the run. To get Midna, I will eventually need to save Tallow by breaking the cage in front of the Forest Temple, but I'm not going to do it just yet. First, I'm going to go get the Master Sword, and conveniently, a side hop is the perfect setup for getting a long jump attack off of that bokoblin and directing Link straight into the Sacred Grove entrance. I do need to be careful here not to go too high with the moon jumps, because going too high will cause Link to take extra damage when he lands, and I don't have very much health. On the vanilla game, the only way to get through the Sacred Grove as human would be to do a pickup slide through the first barrier, which would take hours, but thankfully there are no ceilings on these rooms, and I can simply side hop directly into the area where one would normally fight Skull Kid on the second pass through Sacred Grove before Temple of Time. Because Skull Kid is in the other arena that precedes the Master Sword, this skips the entire Skull Kid chase and fight. As another note about movement, side hop speed is 28 units, which is faster than just jumping straight forwards. So ideally, I would use side hops to clear these barriers between instances of rolling on the ground at 32 speed. However, it's hard to tell whether you have a good angle with a side hop, and being a little bit off on the angle makes it not worth it, so I opted just to go straight forwards. And now I'll pick up the Master Sword as human. The game expects Link to be a wolf here. In a normal playthrough, he would have to be. So he ends up looking a bit crumpled. This spectacle is the result of the game essentially trying to map human Link's textures onto Wolf Link's coordinates. It is truly something to behold. Another example of a cutscene-based disaster befalling Link is taming Epona as Wolf, which can be seen in 100%. In that cutscene, essentially the opposite thing happens, and Wolf Link's textures are mapped onto human Link's coordinates, which, believe it or not, actually looks a little bit glitchier than what we just saw. In a normal any percent run, we get the Master Sword around 20 minutes in, and it's extremely useful for a lot of different reasons. It allows us to warp and transform at will, it does double the damage of the Orden Sword, and it lets us get into Lakebed Temple early. This run doesn't involve beating many enemies or entering Lakebed Temple, but it will be useful to warp and transform, and the Master Sword is a hard requirement for beating the game, because one cannot deal damage to Beast Ganon without it. Every other speedrun I know of that gets the Master Sword warps away after getting it, but we don't have any warp portals open, so we're going to Uku back to Forest Temple, and then Uku back out in order to get to the entrance. Now, having already entered the Forest Temple and gotten the Master Sword, it's finally time to save Tallow, which would happen 4 minutes into a normal any percent run. Even in cutscenes where we don't normally have control of Link, the moon jump inputs sometimes still work. Having saved Tallow, it's now time for the obligatory round of herding goats, because what is a Twilight Princess speedrun without herding... Link? Where are you going? The goats are back oh no. As I mentioned earlier, when going up a slope trying to avoid rolls, side hopping is faster than moon jumping directly forwards, but it is kind of hard to get a good angle. Here's an example of losing a little bit of time to failing to get a good angle towards the load zone. That said, if the community at large had put as much time into optimizing this category as we have put into any percent or 100% or any other main category, then side hopping would probably be more standard and we'd probably just generally be better at it. Fortunately, in that last area, it was pretty easy to side hop to escape Tallow's text box. Now I'll approach the Orden Spring, using Moonjump to skip the crawl space. This is where King Bulblin enters the story, making Ilia lose her memory and Link turn into a wolf in a cutscene that we never hit the trigger for because we skipped the crawl space. However, because we have the Master Sword, Link is crumpled rather than turned into a wolf, and he'll actually be able to stay human this entire time. What's most convenient about being human here is that we'll be able to use our most important item, Uku, to escape the sewers and skip the entire wolf tutorial sequence leading up to meeting Zelda. The cutscene that I just skipped is the one that sets the flag for having Midna shall now appear on the Z button, and that was the entire reason we came here, so now we can leave. We We now leave the Forest Temple for the third and final time, and because of having completed Day 2 of Orden, it's now in Twilight. Now that we have Midna and the Master Sword, the only things we have left to do to beat the game are to go get Ending Blow and enter Hyrule Castle so that we can beat the final bosses. Because we have Moonjump, we can take a very unconventional path to get to Lanayru Province where Castletown is. To begin, I moonjumped out of a dash as a wolf to get all the way to this Howling Stone, because it was faster than any option we had as human, given that there were no enemies to get a long jump attack off of. After howling at the stone, I'll be loaded into the map where normally Link would howl with a golden wolf to spawn it on the overworld map and get a hidden skill. However, by moonjumping high enough, I can unload that wolf, which gets rid of the prompt to howl with it, and then do an angle setup to jump all the way across this map with moonjump. It turns out that this one map houses all of the ledges that Link stands on after howling at one of the 6 Golden Wolf howling stones throughout the overworld, and exiting this area from one of the other ledges will spawn him back at that other howling stone. So I am simply moonjumping all the way to the ledge corresponding to the Upper Zora's River howling stone, and upon hitting the load zone there, I will spawn in Upper Zora's River. The keen observer will note that I don't seem to be worrying about my moonjump height even though I only have 1 heart. A fall from this height would normally deal 4 hearts of damage to Wolf Link, but I landed in the load zone, and that took priority over dealing damage, so I took no damage at all. Again, aside from traveling to Lanayru Province to get to Castletown, we still need to get Ending Blow, so I'll howl at the stone one more time, this time for the normal reason of spawning a Golden Wolf near Castletown, from which we can get Ending Blow on the way to the dungeon. As a side note, the jump I did earlier from one of the ledges like Link is currently howling on to another on this map was actually as ridiculously precise as it looked, especially given that I wanted to land specifically in the load zone, not just on any part of the ledge. The setup that I used to make that manageable began by entering first person and using the item wheel to buffer an angle change, which pointed Link directly at the ledge from afar. I then began moonjumping off of a forward B attack, which was the fastest movement I had available to me, and looked at my live split timer to count for 22.5 seconds of rising with moonjump before releasing the moonjump buttons to land perfectly where I needed to go. This setup for that jump is one of the few things that I came up with myself for this run, and it did take quite a bit of trial and error on emulator with save states, but it wouldn't have even been possible without the amazing practice tools that the community has made. Despite being in the same province, there isn't a direct way to get from Upper Zora's River to Castletown, so what I'll need to do is enter the river area to void out and die, which will death warp me to Lake Hylia. From Lake Hylia, we can take Fire's Cannon to get up to Flight by Foul and then exit to Castletown. Or we could skip the cannon. While running this category, I learned something about Link's speed in the air that applies to non-moonjump categories as well. This jump in particular is a little hard to control because if I were to go at full jump speed the entire time towards Flight by Foul, then I would be caught under the dock because I would move forward too much. I had thought that unless Link entered the falling animation during a jump, then his speed, much like his angle, couldn't be altered mid-jump. But it turns out that releasing the control stick to neutral will cause Link's speed to gradually diminish to 0, and that starting to hold forward again on the stick while Link's speed is dropping will cause the speed to stop dropping and lock in place. Going back to what I said earlier, it's these little nuances of movement that I was forced to consider running this category that I really appreciated. I never considered them before while running any other category, but they do still apply to vanilla Twilight Princess. This is by far the most straightforward part of the run, as I just need to get to Castletown and Wolf Link's dash speed of 45 is faster than any air speed I could get with Moonjump. So I will simply be dashing to the Golden Wolf that I spawned earlier just outside Castletown. There is, though, the minor convenience of being able to skip climbing these vines. Unrelated to any moonjump shenanigans, holding down on the control stick while transforming within a Golden Wolf's radius will cause Link to face the opposite direction, and the Golden Wolf to attack him from behind. Shoutouts to Skyrion. During this cutscene-heavy ending blow learning sequence, I can still apply Moonjump to Link, but because so many parts of the sequence are activated by Link reaching a certain position or entering a certain animation on the ground, I can only use it sparingly, because otherwise the sequence would just never progress. Thankfully, I can at least use it innocuously in a few places. Link has now returned to his home planet, which apparently is the Faron Woods. This is an example of a glitch called a Golden Wolf wrong warp. Because we never used the Golden Wolf that spawns automatically in front of the Forest Temple after beating Faron Twilight, because we never spawned it because we never beat Faron Twilight, we got Ending Blow from the unintended source of a different Golden Wolf. But because the game expects us to get Ending Blow in Faron Woods, it warped us back there after the sequence. Thankfully, for whatever reason, our save warp location is back outside Castletown, so we can simply save warp to get back. Conveniently, because Lineru is in the Twilight state, there is no postman to skip on this bridge. Movement in Castletown in speedruns is always a little bit strange because Wolf Link's dash speed is severely attenuated. Normally, the fastest way to move is to do dash cancels, meaning dashing with A and then immediately pressing B to cancel the dash early enough that Wolf Link can immediately dash again. In this category, it would have been faster for me to do a B attack and carry that with Moonjump all the way to the load zone. But Castletown has a fixed camera, and that makes it really hard to get a good angle on something like that. Now, because we're in Castletown during the Twilight, there is no barrier around the castle yet. There are just these doors that normally Link can't get through, but with the power of Moonjump, the world is our oyster. In a very strange turn of events for a Twilight Princess run, we now enter our first dungeon of the run, Hyrule Castle. I begin by unfortunately forgetting that there's a gap in this hedge and jumping over it instead, to head to the East Wing. The general outline for the dungeon is that I'll need to get a small key to enter the castle, I'll need to then make my way through the castle, get the boss key, and then enter the boss room. There's a small key in each of the two wings of this dungeon, and going to the East Wing will be just a little bit faster than going to the West Wing to fight King Bulblin. I skipped a barrier trigger just before this door by jumping over a hedge with Moonjump, and now I'll make my way over to the entrance to the graveyard. There are some puzzles in the graveyard that use the ball and chain, lantern, and dominion rod to eventually find a small key in a chest. Fortunately though, as I only have one of those three items, it'll still be possible for me to get the small key by moonjumping out of bounds and then falling down to the chest from beyond the gate blocking it. A mid-text trigger appears underneath Link while opening this chest to get the small key, but there is one frame between closing the key's text box and the mid-trigger appearing, where Link can side hop to avoid it, and then save warp to return to the beginning of the dungeon. Fortunately, I did get the side hop there, but it didn't occur to me until after recording this run that I could simply have used Moonjump to prevent Link from touching the trigger on the ground, and save warp to mid-Moonjump. In any case, I now have a small key and will be able to enter the castle. The first room of the interior of the castle contains a barrier designed to trap Link with a bunch of enemies that will attack him, and this is easily bypassed both with and without Moonjump. With Moonjump, we can simply ascend to the Darknut's door. It is also possible with Jump Strike to skip the barrier surrounding the Darknut fight, but again, with Moonjump, we don't really need it. I did consider going for an LJA off of the Darknut to make Link's airspeed just a little bit faster, but it turned out not to be any faster for getting to the door. In this room, we'll finally get to use our friendly Lantern, who has accompanied us on the Y button for most of the run. Thanks, Lantern. In most speedrun categories, these Dynalphos are very quickly defeated with the use of a bomb or bomb arrows, but they can also be pretty quickly dispatched by 7 slashes done diagonally so that they don't defend themselves, followed by 1 quickspin. In this outdoor area, we'll need both the small key and the boss key, and we can simply jump over the trigger that activates the Aralphos fight, skipping it entirely. There is a way to get to this small key without activating the fight in the normal game without a cheat code, and this uses a glitch called Moon Boots, which gives Link a little bit of extra height. But as far as I know, it's not used in speedruns because there's no way to get back out with the small key without triggering the fight. After getting the small key, I set myself up with a side hop angle to get me about half the way to the trigger on the other side. Again, with a little bit more time spent optimizing the category, I probably could have side hopped directly to the cutscene trigger. Speaking of this cutscene trigger, it seems kind of silly that in a moon jump category, I can't somehow bypass this trigger and get the boss key without watching this long cutscene. As a matter of fact, it is possible to skip this cutscene trigger simply by moon jumping over it, and it is further possible to moon jump over the wall blocking the boss key and to enter that boss key area from above, bypassing the gate. The problem, though, is that that leaves us in jail, because we have no way of getting out of the boss key chamber. At least, no fast ways. There are at least 2 ways that we could do it. One would be to save warp, but that would be pretty slow because it would take us all the way back to the beginning of the dungeon. The other is a death warp, and Link doesn't have very much health, but we also don't have any items like bombs that we could use to damage ourselves. Hilariously, it is actually possible to activate the Aralphos fight on the other side of this area, lure the Aralphos all the way over to this side, clip into the boss key chamber as I mentioned before, and finally get the Aralphos to kill Link, which results in a death warp back to where we entered this area. It's a very entertaining strat both to do and to see, but unfortunately it's very unreliable and it takes so long to do that it isn't actually faster than just watching the cutscene. So instead I tried to side hop to the central small key door and very nearly voided out. Again, side hop angles are kind of hard. We now enter the final sequence before the final bosses, the tower climb. In this category though, the tower climb is seriously abridged by virtue of the fact that we can clip out of bounds and go directly to the top of the tower. Moonjump does not change the fact that, just in any other category, Zelda is pure RNG. I can, however, add Moonjump to a backflip to get to Zelda, which is pretty cool. In this fight, we want Zelda to use her energy ball attack as quickly as possible 3 times, and the fastest she can do that is in 7 cycles, meaning that there will be 4 other attacks mixed in. I will often be looking at the ground and generally avoiding looking at the throne area to reduce lag, but otherwise there's not much I can do here. Well, there is one thing I can do in this fight with Moonjump. Ha! Take that. The second phase of the final boss fight, Beast Ganon, will also be done in a pretty similar fashion to how it's done in any other category, the main distinction being that because we don't have the ball and chain or the bow, we'll have to transform into Wolf to stop Ganon's charges. We do get an entertaining visual though, as it appears Wolf Link stops Ganon with his mind. Normally, Midna would be on Link's back here, stopping Ganon with her giant hair hand thing, but because we never beat Lakebed Temple in this run, Midna is not yet set to be on Link's back outside of Twilight's. The damage combination I've done on Beast Ganon on these first two cycles has been one big damage attack, meaning a roll stab, jump attack, or spin attack, followed by 4 individual slashes, and then one full 4-part combo. For the third cycle, I'm not supposed to miss Beast Ganon, but I did. The reason that I used these certain damage combinations is to avoid certain phases of the fight that would be a bit slower than the ones that we got here. Next up is Horseback, which will be done identically to how it's done in any other category. I'll need to get close enough to Ganon that he swings his sword and becomes vulnerable, then chase him around, firing 3 light arrows at him to stun him, and then quick spinning him 3 times. And we now enter the final phase of the final fight with Ganondorf, on pace to beat the game in under half an hour. This contrasts greatly with the nearly 3 hours that it takes to complete any percent without the Moon Jump cheat code. But again, this category isn't really as simple as just pressing the cheat button to go fast. The route for this category is very unique and innovative, and using the Moon Jump movement tech to go as quickly as possible to optimize moving from place to place, in my opinion, is not as difficult as normal movement tech in Twilight Princess, but is more complex, and very interesting to think about. In any case, it's now time to defeat Ganon and save Hyrule, as soon as we've finished jumping on our trampoline. Whoops.